This is the first thing you see when you start up Mafia, City of Lost Heaven. Heaven is in the title of the game, and the first thing you see is a Bible quote. Now that we are strong, ought bear the infirmities of the weak, and not to please ourselves. This quote was not chosen at random. Mafia is a game with a strong message. It is a message about authority, about power, and how absolute power corrupts absolutely. The quote is an imperative, a call to action to those with privilege to look out for and take care of their less fortunate neighbors, specifically those who cannot help themselves. This message is not incidental to the experience of the game Mafia. Religious themes appear throughout the story, and the central conflict of the game is the conflict between Tommy's desire to attain wealth and status and his conscience, or seen from a religious perspective, the preservation of Tommy's immortal soul. The conclusion of the game is a lesson narrated by Tommy about how to live a good life.
I think it's important to keep a balance in things. Yeah, balance, that's the right word. Because the guy who wants too much risks losing absolutely everything. Of course, the guy who wants too little from life might not get anything at all.
From what I have seen, this quote does not appear at the beginning of Mafia Definitive Edition. The word heaven is not even present in the title of the game. Now, I am hugely excited for this game, and I am not arguing from a Puritan point of view. I am not the type of person who wants praying in schools or to censor violent video games. After all, Mafia is a violent video game. My point is simply that Mafia Definitive Edition is not a true remake of the original Mafia, and it seems as if 2K has intentionally watered down this aspect of the game to make it more appealing to a broader audience. And in doing so, there is a danger of the message of Mafia 1 being lost. As you can tell from my previous video, this is not a very popular opinion. People want to enjoy the remake, and so do I. But many OG Mafia players like me are not entirely satisfied with what we are seeing from this remake, and that is why I bring you 10 more problems with Mafia Definitive Edition. Immediately after the quote, we see a shot of the city. Here is a comparison of the opening scene from both games. In the original, the sun dominates, turning the sky and the ocean orange. The rays penetrate and bounce inside the camera lens, causing an array of dazzling flares. In the remake, we see a simple city with a blue sky. This change in color and aesthetic may seem minor to some people. So the sky is blue now, who cares? To put this issue into perspective, imagine that there was a remake of the game GTA Vice City, and the developers did not use a pink sky. This change in color palette has not only occurred in this scene. If you consider the color of Tommy's now iconic taxi, you can see that they have changed it from a dull yellow to a bright yellow, similar to the Xbox version of the game. This change in color has always confused me, and I have heard from others that the reason they have changed the color of the taxi was to more accurately match the taxis of real life. So here we see a tendency of the developers to not follow the original content. Think about why the original creators of the game chose to make the taxi this color. The dull yellow is easy on the eyes compared to the harsh bright yellow of the remake. Both the city and the sky use this dull color palette, and the choice to make the taxi dull yellow was an aesthetic decision to make the game feel like its own washed out world. This bright yellow taxi just feels fake to me, even though it more closely matches real life. In the previous video, I mentioned that replacing Tommy as the subject of the first shot with Detective Norman was a weird decision. Upon deeper inspection, I have found some more peculiarities with this scene. In the original game, Tommy removes his hat and coat after entering the bar before he sits down to talk with the detective. If you look behind the scenes, you can see the 3D model of Tommy disappearing under the floor when our attention is focused on the officer, and a new hatless model is used in the cutscene in its place. This type of trick is common in animation. In the remake, Detective Norman does not remove his hat and in fact wears his hat and coat throughout the meeting, a very unusual thing for someone of that era to do. It is even considered a respectful thing to remove your hat and coat in 2020, and if you think about it, it is normal to want to remove your heavy clothing when entering a warmer area. It seems to me that whichever way you cut it, the reason they did not remove his hat and coat is simple economics. It costs more to use 2 models of Detective Norman in this scene.
Imagine the folly of allowing people to play elaborate games which do nothing whatever to increase consumption. It's madness. Nowadays, the controllers won't approve of any new game unless it can be shown that it requires at least as much apparatus as the most complicated of existing games.
This is a quote from Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World, written 89 years ago, before video games were even in the public imagination. The point is that the cycle of consumerism must continue, and this is accomplished by slowly increasing the requirements of the games that are popular. The games themselves do not have to be as good or entertaining as previous games. They simply have to have higher system requirements that force people to buy new equipment to enjoy them. There are so many examples of this, I don't really need to point them out. The religious festivals of gaming culture are celebrations of discarded technology. They pride themselves in making previous games redundant. The best example I can give is The Sims 3 and The Sims 4. And what is especially clear in this example is how quality is clearly not a priority, nor is quality essential for EA to make buckets of money. You can go right now and install all of the DLCs for Sims 3 and run the user-made graphical patches, and you will have an experience that, after playing Sims 4, feels like Sims 5. Sims 3 is infinitely better than Sims 4, there is no comparison. The difficulty is that in order to install and run Sims 3, you need to be able to have the patience to read lists of instructions to get it running properly, and there is no longer technical support for it, whereas Sims 4 runs as smoothly as a web page and is extremely user-friendly. There are reasons to buy Sims 4. It has great building tools and the graphics/animations are charming, but overall it is a worse gaming experience. Recently I was looking into buying an Assassin's Creed game. I have not played one since Black Flag for obvious reasons, but when I was weighing up my choices, it became clear that no single Assassin's Creed game is objectively better than another, and this is by design. Some Assassin's Creed games have great parkour, some have great fighting, some have great ships, some have ships. There is no one Assassin's Creed game that has all the best qualities from each game, and this is intentional. If there was such a thing as a perfect game, there would be no reason to make or buy other games. In theory, developers could continue to improve a game indefinitely, continually adding features that improve the game, listening to gamers' requests, bending to their will, and in some situations you actually see this happening. Terraria is an amazing example of this, where the developers have consistently added content to the game for years and have asked players for nothing in return. Or the Skyrim modding community that continues to make Skyrim into one of the most comprehensive gaming experiences ever made. The problem with this approach is that it does not optimize for profit. If you want to optimize for profit, you would create amazing features that spread them out over several releases. There is a certain threshold of goodness or value that a game needs to achieve in order for players to buy it, and it makes fiscal sense for a company that employs many artists and engineers to reach this threshold and not exceed it for any single release. If the team does happen to exceed the threshold of expected game value, they split the content into 2 games or DLC in order to justify the work that has been done on that project. This effect is what I referred to in the previous video as the water balloon effect. When you add value to one aspect of a game, you lose value in other areas. In the case of Mafia Definitive Edition, the value has clearly been placed on the graphics and acting, and not much attention has been given to other areas. They do not need to add value to the game because just the simple fact that it is a modern remake of a beloved game is enough for people like me to order it the moment I heard of it. And for others who are new to the Mafia series, they are used to poor quality games and are desperate for anything that seems remotely similar to Mafia 2. The first half of Mafia 2 is amazing. If I judge the game purely based on the first few missions, this alleyway full of life and conversation, I would call it one of the best games ever made. But the conflict between Daniel Vavra, director and writer of Mafia 1 and the first half of Mafia 2, caused 2K Games to cut off the developers and package the game before it began to exceed the expected value threshold. This is why the ending of Mafia 2 causes depression. Mafia 2 is the weakest game in the series, not only because it lacks features, but also because it lacks focus in its narrative and message. Daniel Vavra has said that the last few missions of Mafia 2 are not considered canon by him, and I wonder what the message of the game would have been had he been able to finish it. This tendency for gameplay to decrease in quality over time in favor of better graphics is a result of games becoming a cultural norm. In the time of Mafia 1, games were not as widely played as they are now, and as a small team of developers, there was a huge incentive to make the medium be taken more seriously as an art form. There is an individual effort from the creator of the game and the team members not only to sell the game, but to prove themselves to the world as artists, and to prove that the medium of gaming can be more than just a children's pastime. In the case of Mafia, the City of Lost Heaven, they proved that gaming can send a message. Where GTA presents a vapid, nihilistic world where everything is comedy, nothing matters, and truth is debatable, Mafia presents a specific human perspective where the repetitive act of killing nameless NPCs is called into question. There is an unlockable car in the free ride extreme section of Mafia 1, a free ride mode that is only accessible by finishing the game, or by knocking on the door. The name of the car is the Crazy Horse, and it lives up to its name. The car is ridiculously fast, but almost impossible to drive. It is one of the best cars in the game, yet it has these huge drawbacks that make it far more memorable than some of the other hot rods in the game. It reminds me of how when we play a game, we restrict and limit ourselves in order to create a challenge, and this is what makes games enjoyable. Nothing ruins a game and shortens its playtime than using an infinite money cheat or God mode. Suddenly the game is not fun anymore, and all the features become useless in the face of your infinite power, sucking all the fun out of the game. The Crazy Horse is fun to drive because it is difficult, random, and chaotic. When you give players too much power without challenging them, it corrupts the fun, because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Thanks for watching. I'm very excited to play Mafia Definitive Edition. Like I say, I pre-ordered it immediately. I got quite a good price for it, so I'm happy even if it does not meet expectations. If I had to pay full price for it, I would probably have to consider buying it more carefully. If you don't like that I didn't give a specific list of 10 things, here are some actual problems with Definitive Edition that I noticed. See these beds? They're identical. They look exactly the same and they're placed right next to each other. That's just, as a 3D modeler, I die inside. I know the title is clickbaity, but the point is to get people interested in a larger discussion about the games industry. Thanks again for watching. If you like this video, please check out some of the other content on my channel. I'm working on a music video at the moment. Stay tuned for that. Love you lots. Bye.